In our first episode on this journey through music education, we took a good look at the work of music hubs and how they are linchpins sitting at the centre of what can sometimes seem like a complex web of partners and organisations working in the music education sector. And in the previous episode, we looked at the amazing work done by education and outreach departments such as those at the Halle and the Ulster Orchestra. In this episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at the issue of accessibility, and we're going to start off by hearing all about the work that the charity Awards for Young Musicians do on behalf of young musicians all across the country. Here's the Chief Executive of AYM, Hester Cockcroft.
Musical talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. Our mission as an organisation is to change that, and we have two main ways in which we tackle that challenge. One is to support individual young people from low-income families who've got exceptional potential in music, and we help them with funding and a whole range of other support. The other key area is to support the music education sector, and so our 4 programmes are focused on enabling young people to make the most of their potential and for the sector to support those young people as well as it possibly can.
Hester explained to me that Awards for Young Musicians has 4 main programmes that drive its mission: identifying talent, furthering talent, an annual awards scheme, and an innovation and research programme. The first of these, identifying talent, is to help music leaders and music teachers think a bit differently about what musical potential is.
There are quite a lot of cliches around talent being all about being able to play the violin brilliantly, technically, and of course many young people don't even get the chance to play an instrument, or if they do, it's at a very minimal level at primary school for a very short period of time, perhaps a term or two when they're 9 or 10. And the Identifying Talent programme is about encouraging teachers to think a little bit differently about what musical potential is. It's not about whether or not you can play an instrument, it's about much more fundamental musicality that children might be able to demonstrate who've never even picked up an instrument at all. So the training is about looking at that. We get teachers to take part in a range of music making activities that they could then trial with their classes, which enable them to explore different facets of musical potential that children could demonstrate without ever having picked up an instrument. And we also, as part of that training, look at film footage of one of our musician colleagues, Hugh Nankerville, who was involved in developing this training from the start, working with young people in a range of different settings. And so the teachers can see the young people doing the same exercises that they have taken part in within the training session, and look at how those young people are responding as well, and how they're demonstrating facets of musical potential within that group exercise. So it's a fascinating training programme. And through that, we've identified 8 facets of musical potential, which we feel can be spotted in all sorts of different group music making exercises, and help teachers to identify children with music making potential who can then be supported from that point, who might never otherwise had their potential spotted because they didn't have the money to play an instrument.
It's so encouraging to hear that there is a specific programme such as AYM's Identifying Talent. During chats I've had making this documentary, I've heard a number of stories about young people whose lives have been turned around by a single musical intervention. But these are often happy accidents rather than as the result of targeted support. Like, for example, this story of a young girl in Bolton. I'll let Jo Brockbank, school's programme manager at the Halle, take up the story.
We had a little girl up in Bolton who was a looked after child. She came and she wouldn't look anybody in the eye. She wouldn't speak. She was just always looking down. The Halle place came in and we had a lovely cellist called Becky. She just really took to Becky and she took to the cello. And then she came in one day and she said, it was her birthday last week and she got some money and she was really upset. She said, well, why are you upset? She said, well, I haven't got enough to buy a violin and I want to play a violin. So what was really lovely, Shine is a charity, they bought her a violin and Becky started her off, and then that was what was very good, because the Halle is then able to go to the music service and say, look, can you sort lessons for this child, which they did. And by the time we got to the end of the year, this little girl stood up, she'd written her own song and she sang it in front of these people. And this is a child, so sort of traumatized and everything. It was absolutely remarkable. But of course, now you think, well, I wonder what's happened to her. Has anybody kept up that violin? Because that was obviously going to be her lifeline, really.
So this is yet another great example of multi-partner working with a music hub operating at the centre. But there's a big question here, isn't there? As Jo asked, I wonder what has happened to this girl, for whom the lifeline was the violin. Here's Hester Cockcroft again, talking about Awards for Young Musicians Furthering Talent programme, which is designed to deal with this potential stumbling block.
That is about supporting children who have had a little bit of instrumental learning within their whole class First Access programme, but who don't have the funding to continue to play once the government money has run out.
Hester mentions here the First Access programme. We heard about this when looking at the work music hubs do. Here's a little recap. First Access is one of the key initiatives of the government's National Plan for Music Education. The aim of First Access is to introduce students at key stages 1 to 3 to learning an instrument through weekly whole-class instrumental lessons. I think we would all agree that this is a really important cornerstone propping up educational policy, but implementing this key requirement is not without its challenges. For whilst many schools do have cupboards full of instruments, many simply don't. And where this is the case, music hubs are often able to step in and provide them. Also, it's understandable that not all class teachers feel confident in delivering whole class instrumental lessons. And in these cases, once again, music hubs play a crucial role in helping to fill these gaps in provision, sending, where appropriate, peripatetic music teachers into schools to help deliver these class lessons. But what happens at the end of the 10 lessons that are funded by the government? Many parents can't afford to continue with the cost of individual lessons after 10 weeks. And although some schools are in a position to pick up the bill, many simply aren't. Also, some schools are more enthusiastic when it comes to continuing the First Access experience beyond these 10 lessons, whereas others aren't. But again, music hubs can play an important role here, as Julia Lent, Head of Business Development at my local Cambridgeshire Music Hub, explains.
We generally find a very high level of enthusiasm and understanding from head teachers and also from heads of music in secondary schools and sixth form. What then happens is that then can get diverted by practical situations and budgetary situations and individual members of staff with less or more knowledge. We have to play the long game. We have to be very careful to strike a balance, because it would be very easy just to work with a small handful of schools that really get it the whole time. That wouldn't serve the young people, of course. And one of the good things about having a network of tutors who are in schools regularly is that you can have those conversations and that drip feed of information. And the communications, of course, is very important. We have plenty of teachers signed up to the different communication channels.
So the environment is definitely challenging, but the work of brilliant charities like Awards for Young Musicians and their Furthering Talent scheme has a tremendous amount of reach. Hester Cockcroft continues the story of how their Furthering Talent scheme relies on a multi-partner approach.
And what we do with Furthering Talent is we identify children who've got particular potential through our Identifying Talent training programme for teachers. They then nominate children for Furthering Talent who are both displaying potential but don't have the family means to carry on playing an instrument. Furthering Talent is all about giving children individual support for their music making. They get to choose what instrument they want to play. They have an individual learning plan where they set their own musical goals every term with their teacher. That plan is all about looking beyond technical development, which we take as a given, really looking beyond that to what other musical exploration the child might want to make. They set 3 goals every term, and we have a little bursary fund so that each child can use their bursary fund to support the goals that they have set for themselves. So that could be anything from wanting to go in the normal world to see, a jazz gig because they're interested in jazz, or to buy a little bit of software so they can play around with composing. It could be a whole range of different things that they're interested in, or it could be buying an accessory for something. So it could be very practical, or it could be very much more about exploring a genre or an area of music that they've not yet had access to, but that they're interested in.